The Japanese attack on Pearl Harbor on December 7, 1941 was historically not the first time Japan went to the Hawaii Islands to strike at the American sea power in the Pacific. In 1897, Japan had sent warships to avoid the annexation of these islands in the middle of the Pacific by the United States. Some Japanese even dreamt of annexing the Hawaii Islands, which was not such a crazy idea as it sounds, because a quarter of the population was Japanese by the end of the 19th century. The Americans were, however, quicker and formally incorporated the Hawaii Islands as a territory of the United States in 1898. The United States knew the strategic importance of the Hawaii Islands. They were located in the middle of the Pacific Ocean and formed a bulwark against any force coming from the east with the intention to attack the American mainland. As a result, the islands were fortified in the years after 1898 with at least 10 Federal Army facilities, including the naval base Pearl Harbor in 1899 and an air base in 1922. In this video, I would like to focus on the ground forces on Hawaii and more in particular the US Infantry Divisions during the Second World War. The history of the deployment of American Infantry Divisions on Hawaii started in 1921. That year, 3 divisions were created to defend the 3 pivots of the American presence in the Pacific: the Panama Canal, the Philippines, and the Hawaii Islands. These divisions were named after their location, and their creation underlined the importance of the Hawaii Islands. In August 1941, the Hawaii Division was numbered and lived on as the 24th Division. In the summer of 1941, the tensions between the US and Japan rose following the American embargo on oil exports to Japan. The Japanese Imperial Navy already had plans to attack the American naval base at Pearl Harbor, but were doubting whether or not to occupy the Hawaii Islands in a surprise attack. Initially, they estimated that they needed 15,000 men to capture the islands, the equivalent of 1 division. In September 1941, the Japanese Navy estimated that they needed 30,000 men, in other words 2 divisions. The Americans were oblivious of these plans, but they took precautions and beefed up their presence on Hawaii from 1 to 2 divisions. The Japanese plans never came to fruition because they deemed an amphibious assault too risky. After the Japanese airstrike on Pearl Harbor in December 1941, the Americans increased their ground forces to 3 divisions in May 1942. The Americans had reason enough to fear for a Japanese invasion because the Japanese had shown remarkable skill in amphibious operations in taking the heavily fortified city of Singapore and their conquest of the Philippines and the Dutch East Indies. With the loss of the Philippines, the Americans were afraid that the Hawaii Islands might be next. The Japanese defeat at Midway in June 1942 diminished the chance of a Japanese attack on the Hawaii Islands, but the Americans took no chances and in September 1942 they sent another infantry division. In November of the same year, the 25th Division was sent to Guadalcanal because it became increasingly clear that the Japanese were focusing on this theater rather than an attack on Hawaii. In May 1943, the original sister division also left Hawaii to bolster the defense of Australia. In July 1943, the Hawaii garrison was however once again brought back to 4 infantry divisions by the arrival of the 6th and 33rd Division. These divisions performed garrison duty while training for jungle warfare on the Hawaii Islands. In October, the 27th Division left for operations in the Pacific. During the winter of 1943-1944, the 6th Division also left, but this shortfall was made up by the arrival of the 38th Division, followed by the 7th and the 77th Division. With the arrival of the 98th Division, the garrison of the Hawaii Islands reached the high mark of 6 divisions. In May 1944, the 33rd Division left, followed by the 40th and 77th Division. All these units had been training on Hawaii for combat deployment for at least several months, while performing garrison duty. This was also the case of the 81st and 96th Division, which already left after several months in September together with the 7th Division. This brought the garrison down to 2 divisions, which was further downgraded in December 1944 to just 1 division, leaving only the 98th Division, which stayed until the end of the war in August 1945. Hawaii was deemed safe enough from Japanese attack from May 1944 onward to bring down the garrison from 6 divisions to 2 divisions in October 1944. The status of the ground defense of Hawaii during the Second World War is little well known, but in August 1941, 2 of a total of 30 infantry divisions in federal service were located on the Hawaii Islands, or 7% of all infantry divisions. This number increased in September 1942 to 4 out of 50 infantry divisions, or 8% of all infantry divisions. A high water mark was reached in the spring of 1944 with 6 divisions out of a total of 68 infantry divisions, or 9% of all infantry divisions. By that time, Hawaii had become more of a training ground for jungle warfare for divisions intended for combat deployment. From September 1944 onwards, the number of divisions sharply decreased from 5 infantry divisions to just 1 in January 1945. The threat of invasion had subsided by then, but the strategic islands had always merited at least 1 American infantry division as a garrison.